The traditional plan, which consisted of 17 petitions, was adopted in part by the Special General Conference. Now, there were 17 petitions in the plan, two of which were not considered, so there were 15 petitions. I have about 4 pages of notes on those petitions, or I have summarized them and grouped them together, so just bear with me, and I hope you can understand it in this way I'm presenting it. The traditional plan adds accountability provisions to the Book of Discipline regarding self-avowed practicing homosexuals and same-sex marriages. Some of the provisions of the plan are pastors convicted of performing same-sex marriages are penalized. The first offense is a 1-year suspension without pay. The second offense is termination of conference membership and revocation of credentials of license, ordination, or consecration. Also, the Council of Bishops establishes a council relations committee with the authority to recommend that any bishop may be placed in a retired relation status, and any bishop may be placed in an involuntary leave status. Other petitions passed prohibit the bishop from consecrating other bishops who are self-avowed practicing homosexuals, even if they were elected by the jurisdictional or central conferences. Further, bishops are prohibited from commissioning those on the deacons or elders track, ordaining deacons or elders if Boom has determined they are a self-avowed practicing homosexual, even if they have been recommended by Boom and approved by the clergy session of the annual conference. There are several petitions that related to Boom. As for fitness to serve as a local pastor, election to associate membership, election to provisional membership, and election to full connection, Boom shall conduct an examination to ascertain whether an individual is a practicing homosexual. Boom shall certify that such an examination has occurred and its results. If it is determined that an individual is a practicing homosexual, the board shall not recommend the individual for commissioning or ordination. Other matters. Prior to nomination to Boom, any individual must certify that they will uphold, enforce, and maintain the Book of Discipline related to commissioning, ordination, marriage of self-avowed practicing homosexuals. Every annual conference shall certify that the bishop has done so in terms of nominating to Boom and carrying out these other responsibilities. Failure to do so shall result in GCFA withholding all funds from the United Methodist Church and withdrawing the conference's ability to use the cross and flame logo. Now, the One Church plan and the Simple plan were discussed but not approved. The Connectional plan and the Traditional plan implementation process were included in the omnibus motion for not support, which was passed. So the Connectional plan and the Traditional plan implementation process was not discussed. For the Traditional plan, I said there were 17 petitions, 2 were not considered, and 7 of the petitions passed were ruled unconstitutional by the Judicial Council. That happened in February. It was again considered at their judicial meeting in April, And again, those 7 petitions were ruled unconstitutional. 3 of those ruled unconstitutional had to deal with the council, the council's review committee. There were those 3 positions, they were ruled unconstitutional, and there were several in the boom category which related to the examination of persons to determine if they would uphold, enforce, maintain the book of discipline, that language. So in all, there are 7 petitions that were ruled unconstitutional. What that means, it means that in 2020, I think some of that will come back. We'll try and work that through. There's a lot of work yet to be done. It was a grueling process, a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings. It was the hardest general conference that I've been to. But we love the church, we love the people, and we should love one another. So, Bishop, that concludes my report.
I'm assuming that many of you have read, those of you that wanted to know details about what happened have read or watched clips, video clips and such. Obviously, General Conference was an arduous experience, unlike any other General Conference that I've been to. I have lots of opinions about what happened there and why and what should happen next, and I'm sure all of my colleagues on the delegation do as well. So I just want to issue an invitation on their behalf that if you are interested in hearing more about our opinions, about our reflections, about that experience, I'm sure that they would be happy to share. I certainly am too. What I want to do for the next few minutes is to give you some information so that we all have good clarity on what happened and what didn't happen, and hopefully try to understand some of its implications for us in the next year. What Oliver asked me to cover is really technical. So I'm going to try to make it as digestible as possible, but it's legislation about pensions and property, and there is no way to wade through it without being just a little bit wonky. I'm sorry. So if you have questions following this, please find me or someone else from the delegation to ask. So as Oliver said, once we completed our day of prayer, we prioritized legislation, and after that vote was revealed, the 2 petitions that were given highest priority were from Westpath, dealing directly with our pension system. And I have heard plenty of people since General Conference say, with a little bit of snark, that this is proof that the whole fight that we're having is really a fight about money. But I have to tell you, I don't read it that way. That I believe the fight that we are having is about people, what rights people should have, which relationships between people can be holy and which cannot. The fact that the 2 Westpath petitions rose to the top of the list simply means we have the most consensus about them. It doesn't mean they're the most important, only that they are the least controversial. So with little debate, we passed both in legislative committee and the main plenary floor. 2 petitions. The first deals with a congregation that wants to leave the denomination. And it says that that congregation must pay an amount equal to its share of any unfunded pension liability carried by the annual conference. Now, the people from Westpath determine what the annual conference's unfunded pension liability is, and then the annual conference determines what each church's share would be. This doesn't preclude the annual conference from putting other stipulations on a church exit. It simply ensures that the pension liability is one thing that's covered. Now, you might say, Amy, aren't our pensions fully funded? And the answer is yes, assuming all of the churches currently in the annual conference stay in the annual conference and contribute to the pension system long into the future. This petition deals with the fear that a significant portion of churches might choose to leave, say 10%, and then the projected future funding stream for the pension system would be diminished. So this legislation requires churches pay their fair share of that future need as they leave. The second Westpath petition deals with individual clergy people leaving the denomination. And previously, currently, even if a clergy person turns in their credentials today, they stay a part of the pension system, though they would not accrue new benefits, of course. They would be eligible for pension payments upon retirement for the years they served. This petition changes that. Now, when a clergy person leaves the denomination, their accrued pension benefits are turned into a personal account and put in the personal investment program. Upon retirement, they can access that account as if it were a 401k or an IRA, but they are no longer given a pension guaranteed benefit check. Both of those petitions will take effect on January 1st, 2020. Finally, a word about the disaffiliation plan that was passed. It was the last thing that we did in St. Louis, and this petition lays out a framework for how a local church can disaffiliate from their annual conference over issues of human sexuality and therefore leave the United Methodist Church with their building and their assets. So this petition says a church has to decide by 2023 to do it, and after that, these special provisions will not be available. Second, a charge conference has to be called, and the church has to vote by 2/3 vote in order to leave. Next, a church has to lay out the terms and conditions prescribed by the annual conference. And I believe Scott Brewer, our treasurer, our awesome treasurer, is going to be sharing such a plan with us later in the conference. So you'll hear about this disaffiliation pathway again. The terms have to include full payment of the current year of apportionments, plus an additional 12 months of apportionments. The pension liabilities have to be satisfied, as we just talked about. Any other debts or loans to the annual conference have to be satisfied. And then the Judicial Council in April added one more stipulation that said the annual conference body, we here, have to vote by a simple majority in order to let that church leave. Now, in some way, this seems like a really high bar, like it's a long list. And certainly, I think that pension liability number, which is the biggest cost in the whole thing, that the number that's been estimated for churches has surprised a lot of people. But if we consider the value of most church buildings and church assets, it is actually quite a, perhaps we might say, reasonable price tag for exiting the denomination that birthed and nurtured a congregation for decades or more. That disaffiliation petition took effect immediately upon the close of General Conference, so it is a pathway that is currently open to local churches. I think that's the end of what Oliver wanted me to cover. Again, it was a privilege to serve you as a delegate from the Great Plains. It was not easy. I'm not even sure it was fun, but it was a privilege, and I thank you.